operational chain of command.
So I'm asking you, why did you fire him?
No, but
don't change
you
the
talked
subject,
about
sir.
you talked about an
Please
operational
answer my
moment.
question.
Where does General
Please
George
answer
fall
my
in the
question.
No, it's a simple
National
question.
risk,
You're on the House Armed
mission
Services
risk,
Committee.
Leadership concern. What did he present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict?
Do you know where General George serves on the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you my question one more time, sir. Don't try to flip it on me. Why was he removed? Was he a national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern?
We don't.
Yes or no?
Representative Marilyn Strickland asked Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth one direct question. Why did you fire General Randy George in the middle of an active war? Was he a national security risk, a mission risk, or a leadership concern? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth refused to answer. Every single time. Watch this.
Ms. Strickland.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers and Member Smith, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. This committee is being asked to consider a $1.5 trillion DoD budget request that funds not only weapons and system programs, but the people, leadership, readiness, and trust required to make them effective. When senior leaders are removed abruptly or merit-based promotions are disrupted without clear explanation, Congress does have the responsibility to understand the rationale and operational consequences. So I'm going to focus on Secretary Hegseth. And to start, no one is disputing that senior officers serve at the pleasure of civilian leadership. The issue in front of this is whether the decision to remove General Randy George strengthened the Army or created an avoidable disruption during an active operational period. General George, who also served as commanding general at First Corps at JBLM, has been serving for 4 decades, including multiple command and operational leadership roles, culminating as Chief of Staff of the Army, responsible for readiness, force modernization, and the welfare of over 1 million soldiers and civilians. He was removed in the middle of an active conflict involving U.S. operations against Iran, when leadership continuity is most critical. Public reporting indicates that General George's removal may have followed disagreements over Army personnel matters, including concerns regarding withheld promotions. So my question, Secretary, is this: what specific national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern did General George present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict, or was he removed because he challenged some decisions being made?
As I stated earlier, out of respect to these officers, I don't discuss the nature of the removal, but I would ask an earnest question of you: where does General George fall in the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you, why did you fire him?
No, but
don't change
you
the
talked
subject,
about
sir.
you talked about an
Please
operational
answer my
moment.
question.
Where does General
Please
George
answer
fall
my
in
question.
No, it's a simple
National
question.
risk,
You're on the House Armed
mission
Services
risk,
Committee.
Leadership concern. What did he present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict?
Do you know where General George serves on the operational chain of command?
So I'm asking you my question one more time, sir. Don't try to flip it on me. Why was he removed? Was he a national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern?
We don't.
Yes or no?
We don't talk about the nature of removals,
don't answer
but
the question.
you also won't answer where he is in the operational chain of command because he isn't in it. He isn't in the operational chain of
Gentlady,
command.
reclaimed your time.
Yeah, we're gonna
You want to tie it to the war, but you don't
Sir,
even know where he is in the chain
Secretary,
of command.
Show some
It's
respect,
the
okay?
gentlelady from Washington's time.
Under DOD 1320.04, the Secretary of Defense may withhold or disapprove forwarding nomination after service recommendations in limited circumstances, including newly identified adverse information, pending investigations, reportable information, and questions regarding mental, physical, moral, or professional qualification, incomplete or non-compliant nomination packages, missing certifications, or the need for additional clarification from the military department. Several colonels reportedly selected for brigadier general were removed or withheld after board selection and service certification. Which of these specific grounds applied to each withheld officer, and what objective evidence supported these decisions?
Congressman, that was just one of many boards across the services where we will perform similar reviews, and I anticipate other officers will be removed also.
Okay, but what were the grounds for those?
Again, we don't talk about, out of respect for those officers, we don't talk about the nature of that, and we all serve at the pleasure of the President. We're solving for an institution that needs to be based on merit and professional execution, and there's been a lot of gender and demographic engineering that's been going on for reasons other than the focus of exactly what we should be doing on the battlefield. So whether it's that or execution.
I did not raise gender.
That's implied in every statement that everybody makes. And so
I
ultimately,
did not
as we
raise that.
review all these boards, it has nothing to do with anything other than their performance on the battlefield or their performance in their career.
And these people are thoroughly vetted, thoroughly researched, And I guess my question is this about loyalty to Trump, or is it about what's good for the mission?
I understand what you're implying, but it's about the Constitution and our military and its ability to execute, and I'm going to make sure the president has the finest officers across the force prepared to deliver.
So this committee funds weapons, readiness, recruiting, professional development, and leadership pipelines. But no amount of money can compensate for a force that may lose trust in the fairness of advancement. And this is fairness. We believe in merit. We have always had a merit-based system. That's not the argument.
No, we have not. Not under the
But as
Biden
we
administration,
consider-
we did not. It became social engineering, not merit, and we're fixing
no, it
it
didn't.
quick.
No, it did not. It did not. And when we consider this budget request, we must ensure that taxpayer dollars are matched by sound judgment, credible leadership, and a personnel system worthy of those who serve. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair not recognized.
Let us break this down carefully because Representative Marilyn Strickland walked into that hearing room with a very specific and very serious question. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spent her entire time trying to avoid answering it. Representative Marilyn Strickland represents Washington State, and she sits on the House Armed Services Committee, the committee that is currently being asked to approve a $1.5 trillion Department of Defense budget. She opened by making something very clear. This budget does not just fund weapons and systems. It funds people. It funds leadership. It funds readiness. And it funds trust. And Representative Marilyn Strickland made the point that when senior leaders are removed abruptly, or when merit-based promotions are disrupted without clear explanation, Congress has a responsibility to understand why. And that responsibility is exactly what she was there to exercise. So let us talk about General Randy George. General Randy George served in the United States Army for 4 decades. 4 decades. He held multiple command and operational leadership roles throughout his career, including serving as commanding general at 1st Corps at Joint Base Lewis McChord, which is in Representative Marilyn Strickland's home state of Washington. He rose to become the Chief of Staff of the Army, the highest uniformed position in the entire United States Army. As Chief of Staff, General Randy George was responsible for the readiness, the modernization, and the welfare of over 1 million soldiers and civilians. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth removed him. Not at the end of a tour, not at a natural transition point, not after a completed mission. In the middle of an active conflict involving United States military operations against Iran. Representative Marilyn Strickland acknowledged up front that no one is disputing the fact that senior officers serve at the pleasure of civilian leadership. That is the law. That is the system. That is how it works. But the question is not whether Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had the legal authority to remove General Randy George. The question is whether doing so, in the middle of an active conflict, was justified. And more specifically, reporting indicates that General Randy George's removal may have followed disagreements over Army personnel matters, including concerns about promotions that were being withheld. So Representative Marilyn Strickland asked Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth directly, what specific national security risk, mission risk, or leadership concern did General Randy George present that justified removing him in the middle of a conflict? Or was he removed because he challenged decisions being made above him? That is a yes or no question. That is a simple question. That is the exact kind of question that congressional oversight exists to ask. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's response was to ask Representative Marilyn Strickland, where General Randy George falls in the operational chain of command. Representative Marilyn Strickland did not take the bait. She said clearly, do not flip this on me. Answer the question. Why was he removed? Was he a national security risk, a mission risk, or a leadership concern? Yes or no? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, we do not talk about the nature of removals. And then he repeated his question about the chain of command, implying that because General Randy George is not directly in the operational chain of command, his removal does not affect the war effort. But that argument misses the point entirely. The Chief of Staff of the Army is responsible for building, training, equipping, and sustaining the entire Army. He is responsible for making sure the soldiers in that operational chain of command are ready to fight. Removing the person responsible for Army readiness during an active conflict absolutely has operational consequences. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth refusing to explain why it happened does not make those consequences disappear. Then Representative Marilyn Strickland moved to a second serious issue: withheld military promotions. Under official Department of Defense policy, the Secretary of Defense may withhold or disapprove officer promotions only in very specific and limited circumstances. Those circumstances include newly identified adverse information, pending investigations, questions about an officer's physical or professional qualifications, or incomplete nomination packages. Representative Marilyn Strickland pointed out that several colonels who had been selected for promotion to brigadier general by official selection boards and certified by their respective military services were subsequently removed or withheld from that promotion list. She asked Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth directly which of those specific legal grounds applied to each withheld officer, and what objective evidence supported those decisions. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's answer was stunning. He said this was just one of many boards across the services where similar reviews will be performed, and he anticipates other officers will be removed as well. He did not name a single specific ground. He did not cite a single piece of objective evidence. He just confirmed that more removals are coming. And when Representative Marilyn Strickland pressed him again for the actual grounds for these decisions, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said, "Out of respect for the officers, we do not talk about the nature of those decisions." And then he said something very revealing. He said there has been a lot of gender and demographic engineering going on in the promotion process for reasons other than battlefield performance. Representative Marilyn Strickland pushed back immediately. She said she did not raise gender. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said it is implied in every statement everybody makes. That is a remarkable response. Representative Marilyn Strickland asked about specific legal grounds for specific promotion decisions. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth responded by talking about gender engineering without being asked about gender at all, which raises an obvious and important question. If the promotions being withheld are truly based on merit and battlefield performance, why is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth bringing up gender and demographics when nobody asked? Representative Marilyn Strickland then asked the most direct version of the question. Is this about loyalty to President Donald Trump, or is it about what is good for the mission? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said it is about the Constitution and making sure the president has the finest officers across the force. But he did not say it is about merit. He did not say it is about battlefield performance. He said it is about making sure the president has the officers he wants, and that distinction matters enormously. Representative Marilyn Strickland closed with something that every member of that committee and every American taxpayer should hear. She said no amount of money can compensate for a force that loses trust in the fairness of its own advancement system. When soldiers and officers believe that promotions depend on politics rather than performance, recruitment suffers, retention suffers, morale suffers, and ultimately, readiness suffers. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired back, saying the previous administration engaged in social engineering, not merit, and that this administration is fixing it. Representative Marilyn Strickland said simply, "No, it did not." And that is where the exchange ended. Here is the summary of what we just witnessed. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the Chief of Staff of the Army in the middle of an active war and refused to explain why. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth withheld promotions from officers selected by official military boards and refused to cite the specific legal grounds. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth raised gender and demographics unprompted when asked about merit-based decisions. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth framed the entire promotion system around giving the president the officers he wants. Representative Marilyn Strickland asked all the right questions. The American people, and the soldiers serving right now, deserve real answers. Share this with someone who needs to understand what is happening. Leave your thoughts below, and subscribe so you do not miss the next breakdown.